Picture opening your eyes tomorrow to a world without paychecks, managers, or Monday mornings. No alarms ringing, no urgent emails, and zero endless meetings. How would you spend your time? If your immediate thought is a profound sense of liberation, you share a mindset with nearly every person who lived over the last 300 millennia. For the vast majority of our species' existence, that absolute freedom was just an ordinary afternoon. Of course, they lacked the concept of weekdays entirely. Breaking our lives into 7-day blocks, where we despise 5 and desperately cling to 2, is a surprisingly modern, and frankly terrible, social construct. This leads to a fascinating mystery that is worth pondering. How exactly did early humans fill their hours from sunrise to sunset? Without offices to commute to, social media feeds to mindlessly scroll, or streaming services to binge, what did a standard daily routine look like back then? The reality is astonishing and slightly humiliating for modern society, as those so-called primitive ancestors arguably enjoyed a higher quality of life than we do today. That is not an exaggeration, as the historical data powerfully backs up this claim. The greatest myth we have swallowed about antiquity is that it was an endless, terrifying fight for survival. We picture early men waking up, dodging predators, making animalistic noises, and dropping dead by age 30. But that bleak assumption is entirely incorrect. The reason we bought into this falsehood is based on a misinterpretation of the physical remnants they left behind. We discovered scarred bones and hunting tools, immediately assuming their days were filled with relentless violence. Yet, that narrative ignores the breathtaking cave art and 40,000-year-old flutes carved out of mammoth tusks and bird skeletons. We also uncovered elaborate accessories, including necklaces meticulously crafted from pierced stones, animal teeth, and polished seashells. There is even proof of individuals trekking vast distances across untamed, roadless terrains simply to exchange exotic pigments for their cosmetic body art. Moreover, archaeologists have unearthed carefully arranged graves adorned with flowers, where deeply disabled elders were laid to rest with profound reverence and love. These are not the actions of desperate creatures constantly fleeing death, but rather a society overflowing with free time. This very realization pushed a 60s anthropologist named Marshall Solins to make a radical. He decided to rigorously analyze the daily schedules of contemporary foraging tribes to glimpse our pre-agricultural past. By observing groups like the San in the Kalahari, the Tanzanian Hadza, and Australian Aboriginals, he gathered groundbreaking data. What this researcher discovered completely shattered the long-held myth of prehistoric life being a constant, desperate struggle. On average, these individuals devoted merely 3 to 5 hours a day to essential chores like foraging, hunting, and shelter maintenance. Once those basic survival needs were met, the remainder of their day was entirely and legitimately their own. They filled these hours with socializing, sleeping, crafting musical instruments, playing games, and weaving rich community narratives. Because of this incredible lifestyle, Solins famously dubbed these ancient foragers the first truly wealthy civilization on Earth. Their affluence had nothing to do with possessions, as they purposely owned very little to remain unburdened while traveling. Instead, their true wealth lay in having an abundance of genuinely free, unscheduled time, something we desperately chase today. Compare their existence to our modern reality, where endless commutes, demanding jobs, and daily chores consume our lives. A typical adult today is incredibly lucky to squeeze out a mere 2 or 3 hours of personal leisure. Even worse, we usually spend that brief window glued to screens, consuming content designed to keep us perpetually anxious. It is a staggering realization that we currently endure far more stress and labor than people hunting with basic sticks. But how exactly did they spend all that glorious free time? The answer lies in their phenomenal communication skills. If you visited an ancient campfire, you would be struck most by their relentless, passionate, and deeply engaging conversations. Studies of contemporary foraging tribes reveal that a massive 60 to 70% of their free time is devoted purely to chatting. These discussions were rarely about mere survival tactics, like tracking beasts or figuring out the local geography. Instead, they bantered, bickered, flirted, and swapped rumors, weaving intricate tales about mysteries they could not quite grasp. The renowned anthropologist Robin Dunbar suggests this explosion of language was actually our species' unique method of social grooming. While other primates build trust by intimately picking parasites from a companion's fur, this physical act takes tremendous time. Once early human tribes began to expand, finding the hours to physically groom dozens of peers became mathematically impossible. Evolution provided a brilliant shortcut, allowing us to use words to socially groom half a dozen friends at once around the flames. In this light, spreading rumors isn't a toxic trait, but rather the essential original software that kept early societies connected. So whenever you spend hours laughing and sharing pointless stories with loved ones, you are performing our most ancient and vital ritual. Beyond our social habits, another deeply ingrained myth usually shocks people when they uncover the truth about how we rest. Expecting to sleep for 8 solid hours is a completely unnatural habit, forced upon us by industrial schedules and artificial lights. After decades of digging through old diaries and court documents, historian Roger Kirch uncovered our true historical sleep patterns. Before electric bulbs took over, humanity rested in 2 distinct shifts, drifting off at dusk before naturally waking up around midnight. Rather than suffering from modern anxiety, folks embraced this nightly intermission, staying alert for an hour or 2 without distress. They used this quiet midnight gap to meditate, bond with spouses, visit neighbors, or simply ponder life before returning to their beds. Historical documents from the Middle Ages and Antiquity casually reference these 2 sleep phases as completely ordinary. It was only the arrival of gas lamps and later electric bulbs in the 19th century that squeezed our natural rest into an artificial 8-hour chunk. So if you find yourself peacefully wide awake at 2 in the morning, wondering if you have a sleep disorder, you probably do not. Your biology is simply reverting to a rhythm we followed for millennia, longing for the gentle glow of a campfire and absolute darkness. Speaking of our distant ancestors, we often harbor a massive misconception about prehistoric people, assuming their technology was incredibly primitive. We hear the term Stone Age and picture crude creations, but their survival demanded highly skilled craftsmanship that took vast experience to master. Consider stone knapping, where creators shaped materials like obsidian by executing a highly specific sequence of precise strikes. While it might look like casually banging rocks together, the crafter actually had to perfectly predict how the material would fracture. Every single hit required exact control over the angle and impact force, since one mistaken tap could shatter hours of careful work. Even today's archaeologists and dedicated enthusiasts admit that reaching genuine competency in this ancient art requires years of continuous practice. Beyond tools, surviving freezing climates demanded a massive effort in clothing production, starting with meticulously scraping and treating animal hides so they wouldn't rot. To stitch these thick leathers into wearable garments, ancient tailors engineered specialized tools, including bone sewing needles dating back over 50 millennia. Someone deliberately sat down with primitive stone tools to drill microscopic eyes into those tiny bone splinters just so they could sew. They put immense effort into these garments because the quality of their stitching deeply mattered to them, and they genuinely cared about the final result. This profound dedication to their craft inevitably extended to their stunning cave art, which still evokes deep emotions in anyone who sees it today. Take the masterpieces at Lascaux, crafted roughly 17 millennia ago, or the breathtaking Chauvet Pont d'Arc site, dating back a staggering 36,000 years. Far from being amateurish scratches, these are highly complex, dynamic, and meticulously planned portraits of the prehistoric animal kingdom. The rocky walls come alive with horses caught in mid-stride, bison glancing backward, furious rhinos, and prides of lions on the prowl. Their intuitive grasp of anatomy, depth, and shading is so incredibly advanced that it continually leaves modern professional illustrators in absolute awe. These ingenious creators even utilize the natural bumps and ridges of the cavern rock to grant their subjects a striking three-dimensional presence. When illuminated solely by the dancing glow of a campfire, these ancient beasts appeared to shift, breathe, and march across the stone. Tens of thousands of years ago, long before modern technology, these visionary minds essentially engineered cinematic magic in pitch-black caves. Achieving this meant creators willingly spent grueling hours standing, squatting, or laying flat against the unforgiving stone floor to finish their work. They didn't paint for food or survival, but rather out of a primal urge to communicate something lasting through a timeless medium. Beyond their artistic pursuits, our ancestors were profoundly playful creatures, displaying a hallmark trait shared by highly intelligent animals like dolphins and wolves. Humans took this instinct to another level entirely, creating elaborate pastimes like the royal game of Uar, a Mesopotamian board game from 2500 BC. While its mechanics were deciphered from an old Babylonian tablet, the human urge to organize games stretches back way before any formal empires existed. In every foraging society studied, youth engage in rich, imaginative fun where they practice grown-up skills, invent rules, and learn to collaborate. Unconnected ancient groups globally develop similar pastimes, like foot races and wrestling, proving that competitive fun is a hardwired human instinct. Enjoying a relatively brief workday meant early humans had abundant free time for these games, which served as vital tools for building emotional intelligence. Kids back then didn't sit in formal classrooms. Their wild environment was their ultimate instructor, teaching them through direct experience. But perhaps the most profoundly moving truth about our ancestors, often ignored by modern myths, is how fiercely they protected one another. Archaeologists have unearthed remains of people with severe, lifelong ailments who couldn't physically contribute to their tribe's daily sustenance. Despite being what we might assume was a burden, these individuals lived for decades simply because their community actively nurtured them. Take the famous Neanderthal found in Iraq's Shanidar cave, a man who miraculously survived with a withered, severed right arm. Besides missing a limb, he was partially blind, largely deaf, and walked with the lingering effects of massive leg trauma. He lived to the surprisingly ripe old age of 40, even though he was completely incapable of foraging or tracking prey. Under a brutal survival of the fittest mindset, he should have perished early on, yet his people deliberately fed and sheltered him by choice. Similarly, 500,000 years ago in present-day Spain, a young child with Down syndrome was supported and kept alive until age 8. Nurturing someone with such profound developmental needs in a harsh prehistoric landscape required a level of devotion driven purely by love. We also frequently uncover ancient skeletons bearing completely mended broken bones, which reveals another remarkable layer of their innate compassion. A fused bone meant that during long weeks of total helplessness, a companion patiently brought them meals and tended the fire. When someone eventually passed, their loved ones laid them to rest intentionally, arranging graves with meaningful offerings and heartfelt ceremonies. These ancient fossils don't reveal a cold, ruthless existence, but rather communities willing to sacrifice precious resources out of deep empathy. Yet alongside this immense humanity, they also engaged in hunting practices that were absolutely mind-blowing, which we must explore next. Before bows and arrows were invented around 70 millennia ago, our ancestors utilized a hunting tactic that honestly sounds completely absurd. It is known as persistence hunting, and the premise is exactly what the name implies: relentlessly tracking a massive beast. Instead of trying to outsprint a creature like a wildebeest or kudu, you simply lock onto its trail and maintain a steady jog. You purposefully chase them right through the blistering midday sun, tracking your prey for hours upon agonizing hours. Because most four-legged beasts rely on panting to cool their bodies, they absolutely have to stop moving to avoid overheating. But every single time the exhausted animal pauses to catch its breath, you emerge on the horizon, forcing it to flee again. After 5, 8, or even more hours of this relentless pursuit, the prey becomes so dangerously overheated that it simply collapses. At that point, the animal is completely drained and physically unable to stand, allowing you to stroll up calmly and finish the hunt. This entire strategy was only possible because humans possess a unique superpower. We cool ourselves through sweating rather than panting. Perspiring allows us to maintain continuous physical exertion in scorching temperatures that would quickly incapacitate almost any other mammal on Earth. Our hairless bodies, flat feet, and surprisingly large glutes were actually precision engineered by evolution for long-distance running in the heat. Everything from our long legs to the way our heads remain perfectly balanced without violently bobbing around is a direct adaptation for endurance. We can even breathe independently of our footsteps, a massive advantage over animals that are forced to inhale in sync with their gallop. So when you are struggling through a half marathon, remember that you are utilizing ancient hardware designed specifically for chasing down giant prehistoric prey. Yet, despite being such terrifyingly effective endurance predators, early humans were actually vastly superior to us when it came to genuinely resting. They didn't just log more sleep, they experienced a deep cognitive and emotional downtime that we have largely forgotten how to achieve. Brain scientists highlight a specific neural circuit called the default mode network, which only powers up when our attention turns completely inward. This unique mental state triggers our ability to daydream, safely process our emotions, and creatively visualize both our past and our future. However, for this vital network to function properly, the brain desperately needs true stillness, totally devoid of any outside distractions. Yet today, we constantly flood our waking hours with endless digital noise, filling every quiet second with screens, feeds, and alerts. Without even realizing it, our modern society has built an environment where giving your mind a genuine break demands intense, deliberate effort. Our prehistoric ancestors naturally embraced this void, easily spending their dark evenings simply staring into the glowing embers of a campfire. They sat there completely unbothered, allowing their inner thoughts to naturally drift and fade away without any specific goal or pressure. This daily downtime acted as a profound anchor for their psychological well-being, effortlessly regulating emotions and solving complex problems in the background. It is certainly no coincidence that humanity's greatest historical breakthroughs in philosophy, art, and technology usually blossomed during periods of quiet contemplation. Prehistoric people didn't need brain scans to understand this magic. They simply lived it by sitting in quiet reflection for hours on end. Within that vast, uninterrupted mental space, they began connecting the dots, pondering deep mysteries about moving constellations and the nature of mortality. The vivid myths they shared around those ancient flames eventually evolved into the very foundations of modern science, grand literature, and religion. All of our brightest ideas were born from minds granted the freedom to wander, begging the ultimate question: would you ever go back? Share your honest answer down in the comments below. Remember to take care of your own minds, and I will see you soon.